The sound of my mother's bones hitting the gas station floor still echoes in my mind. She was only 3 steps from the convenience store door when those 2 men in immaculate suits pushed her aside like an inconvenient obstacle in their path. I watched her cane slip, her 78 years collapsing in slow motion as her fragile body tried to find balance where there was none. "Some elderly folks should stay home if they can't walk properly," said the taller one, adjusting his navy blue tie without even looking back. The other just laughed, waving with his gleaming Apple Watch as they clutched their coffee cups. I remained motionless, my body frozen in terrible stillness, while something visceral inside me twisted like a wounded animal. I helped my mother to her feet, her eyes meeting mine, not with tears, but with that silent dignity that had always defined Helen Reynolds, literature professor for 4 decades. The same dignity she maintained when she raised a son alone after my father died when I was only 12. "I'm fine, David," she whispered, her trembling hands adjusting her beige coat. Some people never learned life's most important lesson. I recognized those men. Not personally, but the type, the precise haircut, the expensive watches, the sense of entitlement that comes with top-floor offices. In my 30 years evaluating the character of executives, I'd learned to read people like open books. "Can you see the logo on their badges?" I asked discreetly, pretending to fix her scarf while my eyes registered every detail. Thornwell Corporation. Name, position, department. The information instantly archived in my mind. I watched them getting into a black Audi while helping my mother back to the car. For 35 years I had evaluated executives for the largest corporate boards in the country. My reports had determined hundreds of careers. My word, always measured and precise, was considered law in boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made. I turned on the car ignition, controlled anger making my movements deliberately slow as I pulled my phone from my pocket. One message to my assistant was enough. "Claire, I need complete information on Robert Henderson and Michael Collins from Thornwell, and check my schedule for today." I knew that in 2 hours I would be at Thornwell Corporation for a meeting the board had scheduled weeks ago, a critical evaluation to decide which executives would be promoted, the kind of meeting where anxious faces would try to impress the legendary Mr. Reynolds with their charts and projections, never imagining that I observed them in moments like this, at the gas stations and elevators of the world, where true character is revealed. As I drove, my mother's voice broke the silence. "What are you thinking, David?" I looked at her, at the hands that taught me to read, that held mine when I was rejected from college, that silently applauded when I graduated. "I'm thinking," I replied calmly, "that some people still need to learn that most important lesson." I said nothing more. I didn't need to. In 2 hours, I would walk into that building. And unlike those executives, I never needed to raise my voice to be heard. I drove my mother home in silence, the hum of the car's engine filling the space where words should have been. She kept glancing at me, reading my face the way she once read Hemingway to her students, searching for the meaning between the lines. "You're planning something, David," she said finally. Not a question, a statement. The traffic light turned red, and I stopped, watching raindrops begin to collect on the windshield. "Those men work for Thornwell," I said, "the company I'm evaluating today." Her eyes widened slightly. After decades of watching me assess corporate cultures, she understood exactly what this meant. "David, promise me you won't do anything impulsive." A memory flashed through my mind. I was 10 years old, bloodied after defending a classmate from bullies. My mother hadn't scolded me for fighting. Instead, she'd cleaned my wounds and said something I never forgot. "Power isn't about who hits hardest, David. It's about knowing when you don't need to hit at all." "Nothing impulsive," I promised, pulling into her driveway. "Just thorough." As I helped her inside, my phone vibrated. Claire had sent the information I requested. Robert Henderson, Executive Vice President of Operations. Michael Collins, Chief Marketing Officer. Both up for promotion to a newly created president position. Both scheduled to present their vision to me in exactly 90 minutes. "I'll call you later," I told my mother, kissing her forehead. "Remember to ice your hip." "David," she called as I reached the door, "remember what I always taught you about justice versus revenge?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The distinction had been her life's lesson to me, one that had guided my career evaluating executives. Justice enlightens. Revenge consumes. Back in my car, I called Claire. I need everything on Henderson and Collins, not just the performance metrics. I want the complaints no one acted on, the subordinates who left without explanation, the patterns no one's documented. Already done, Claire replied. Sent to your secure server. And Mr. Reynolds, the board chairman, called. They're particularly interested in your character assessment for this promotion. I allowed myself the smallest smile. Tell him I'll be especially thorough today. 30 minutes later, in my home office, I studied the files Claire had assembled. Henderson and Collins were textbook corporate climbers, brilliant credentials masking troubling patterns. 3 administrative assistants had quit Henderson's department in 18 months. Collins had taken credit for campaigns largely developed by junior staff who were subsequently let go during restructuring. These weren't crimes, just the invisible infractions that create toxic corporate cultures, the kind most consultants miss, but that I had built my reputation on identifying. I changed into my most understated suit, charcoal grey, impeccably tailored but intentionally forgettable. My power had never come from intimidation. It came from observation, from silence, from asking the question no one expects in exactly the moment they think they're safe. At my desk, I opened my leather portfolio, the same one I'd carried for 20 years, and wrote a single quote on a blank page. Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. I stared at it, thinking of my mother on that gas station floor. The Thornwell corporate headquarters loomed 40 stories high, a glass monument to ambition. As I handed my car to the valet, I noticed Robert Henderson and Michael Collins hurrying through the front entrance, laughing, the same coffee cups in hand. They didn't notice me, just another man in a grey suit, invisible to their self-important eyes. In the lobby, the receptionist recognized me immediately. Mr. Reynolds, the board is so honored you're conducting this evaluation personally. I nodded politely. I decided this one required my direct attention. As I stepped into the elevator, I thought of my mother's words about justice versus revenge. The line between them is intention. Revenge seeks to inflict pain. Justice seeks to restore balance. The elevator doors opened on the top floor. Through the glass conference room walls, I could see Henderson and Collins arranging their presentation materials, checking their reflections in the windows, rehearsing their carefully crafted personas. They had no idea I'd already begun my evaluation, at a gas station where they thought no one who mattered was watching. I straightened my tie and walked toward the conference room door, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet. In 2 minutes, I would enter. And what would happen then wouldn't be revenge. It would be something far more powerful. If you enjoyed this part of my story, I'd be grateful if you'd like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. The conference room fell silent as I entered. 6 executives arranged around a gleaming mahogany table, their faces shifting from rehearsed confidence to barely concealed anxiety. Henderson and Collins sat side by side, their matching Thornwell blue ties suddenly straightened, their postures stiffening. Mr. Reynolds, the board chairman William Porter, rose to greet me. We're honored you've taken personal interest in this evaluation. I placed my worn leather portfolio on the table, deliberately anachronistic among their tablets and laptops. I always take personal interest in character assessment, Mr. Porter. For 30 years, I'd perfected the art of the silent entrance. I didn't command attention. I absorbed it. The power wasn't in what I said, but in what they projected onto my silence. Perhaps introductions are in order, Porter suggested, gesturing around the table. That won't be necessary, I replied, opening my portfolio. I prefer to form my own impressions. I could feel Henderson and Collins exchanging glances. Most consultants began with reassurances, with explanations of their methods. I began with nothing but observation, the most unsettling evaluation technique of all. We've prepared comprehensive presentations, Henderson said, his voice carrying the artificial warmth executives practice before mirrors. Starting with our 5-year strategic vision, I'm more interested in your current decision-making processes. I interrupted softly. Tell me about a recent everyday choice you made. Something small, not something you prepared for this meeting. The question landed like a stone in still water. Henderson blinked rapidly. Well, we just implemented a new efficiency protocol in operations that, not professional, I clarified, my voice remaining gentle. Personal. Sometimes the smallest actions reveal the most about leadership capacity. Collins jumped in, clearly believing he'd detected an opportunity. Just this morning, I decided to treat my team to coffee. Small gesture, but it builds morale. Interesting, I replied, making a brief note. Were you at the Western Avenue gas station around 9:15? The color drained from Collins's face so quickly it was almost audible. Henderson's pen clattered to the table. "Ah, yes, we stopped for coffee there," Collins managed. I looked up, my expression neutral. "Did you notice an elderly woman with a cane entering the convenience store?" The silence in the room deepened, becoming almost a physical presence. The other executives looked confused, but Henderson and Collins had stopped breathing. "I didn't," Henderson began. "She fell," I continued, my voice still conversational. "After being pushed aside, the two men responsible didn't stop to help." I turned a page in my portfolio, revealing nothing but blank paper, a technique I'd perfected to make people rush to fill the silence. "Mr. Reynolds," Henderson said quickly, "if there was some incident, I assure you we weren't aware." "I've found," I interrupted gently, "that how people treat those they perceive as insignificant is the most accurate predictor of how they'll treat employees when no one's watching, more revealing than any presentation or interview." My phone vibrated with a text. I glanced down to see a message from Claire. "Hospital called. Your mother's hip X-ray shows a hairline fracture." A cold, clarifying anger flooded through me, but outwardly, I remained composed. I thought of my mother teaching me chess as a child. The winning move often looks like no move at all to your opponent. "Let's continue," I said calmly. "Mr. Collins, you mentioned building morale. Tell me how you measure the effectiveness of your leadership beyond simple productivity metrics." For the next hour, I led them through a labyrinth of questions that seemed disconnected, but formed a precise pattern only I could see. Questions about mentoring, about handling disagreement, about failure. With each response, Henderson and Collins grew more uncomfortable, sensing my evaluation had begun long before they entered this room. "Your operational improvements show impressive numbers," I noted, reviewing their reports. "Yet I see turnover in support staff has increased 40% in your division, Mr. Henderson." "Cost-cutting measures require difficult decisions," he replied, recovering some confidence. "And the 3 administrative assistants who left in the past 18 months? His smile faltered. "Personnel matters are complex." I nodded thoughtfully. Complex indeed, like helping someone who has fallen. I closed my portfolio and stood, an hour before the meeting was scheduled to end. "I believe I have what I need for today." "But we haven't presented our vision for the president position," Collins protested, panic edging into his voice. I paused at the door. "Sometimes, Mr. Collins, the most important qualifications have nothing to do with vision. They have to do with what you see and what you choose not to see. I'll deliver my full assessment to the board tomorrow." As I walked down the hallway, Porter hurried after me. "David, what's going on? Those 2 are our top candidates." I stopped, turning to face him. "William, your company spent millions last year on a human-first rebranding campaign. Tell me, is that just marketing or do you actually mean it?" He looked genuinely confused. "Of course we mean it. Then perhaps you should know what happened this morning before you consider who will represent that principle to your employees and the world." I handed him a business card. "This is the address of a gas station with security cameras. I suggest you review today's footage from 9:15 a.m. before our meeting tomorrow." As the elevator doors closed, I texted Claire, "I'm heading to the hospital, and tomorrow prepare the full ethics assessment report on Henderson and Collins. Include the incident from this morning." The elevator descended, and with it, the weight of practiced restraint I'd carried all day. My mother's words echoed in my mind. "Justice enlightens, revenge consumes." What waited for Henderson and Collins wasn't the petty satisfaction of revenge. It was something far more enduring, the unavoidable light of accountability. The hospital corridor stretched before me, antiseptic and unforgiving under fluorescent lights. I found my mother in a curtained bay in the emergency department, her small frame dwarfed by the medical bed. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, then immediately narrowed with concern. "You're supposed to be in your meeting," she said, reaching for my hand. "The meeting ended early," I replied, taking her fragile fingers in mine. They felt cooler than they should. "The doctor says you have a hairline fracture," she sighed, looking down at her hip. "They want to keep me overnight. Precautionary, they say. At my age, everything becomes precautionary." I pulled a chair closer, studying the lines on her face, each one earned through decades of quiet strength. "Why didn't you tell me you were hurt when it happened?" "Because I saw your eyes, David," she answered, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I know what happens when justice becomes personal for you. The words hit harder than she intended. In 35 years of corporate consulting, I'd maintained an almost religious objectivity. My evaluations were feared because they were fair, not because they were vindictive. But she was right. This was different. This was my mother on a cold floor, while men in expensive suits laughed. I didn't do anything impulsive, I assured her. A small smile crossed her face. But you did something. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated with a text from William Porter. Watch the security footage. Need to speak with you immediately. Rest, I told my mother, kissing her forehead. I'll be back soon. In the hospital cafeteria, I called Porter. David, his voice was grave. The footage is unambiguous. Henderson and Collins clearly shoved your mother and walked away laughing. Why didn't you tell me she was your mother? Would it matter who she was? I asked quietly. Would it change what they did? His silence provided the answer I expected. I'll need to discuss this with the board, he finally said. This complicates things. Does it? I pressed. Or does it simplify them? After hanging up, I sat alone with my coffee growing cold, remembering a lesson my mother taught me when I was 15. I discovered my history teacher was unfairly grading students he disliked. Instead of confronting him directly, Mom encouraged me to document the pattern and present it to the principal, not as an accusation, but as a concern for educational integrity. The teacher was removed the following semester. The strongest move, she'd told me, isn't exposing someone's wrongdoing. It's creating a situation where they must confront it themselves. My phone vibrated again. Claire had sent the ethics report, comprehensive, meticulous, and damning. Henderson and Collins had histories of similar behavior, dismissing concerns from lower-level employees, taking credit for others' work, creating hostile environments for those they deemed unimportant. As I drove back to Thornwell headquarters for the emergency board meeting Porter had called, I thought about power, how it reveals character rather than building it. Henderson and Collins had shown who they truly were when they thought no one consequential was watching. The boardroom was tense when I arrived. Henderson and Collins sat stiffly at one end, their faces ashen. The security footage had been seen by everyone present. Mr. Reynolds, Porter began formally, in light of today's revelations, the board has asked for your final assessment before making any decisions about the president position. I placed my portfolio on the table and looked directly at Henderson and Collins. Gentlemen, I said quietly, would you like to tell the board what happened at the gas station this morning? Collins stared at the table. Henderson cleared his throat. It was an unfortunate incident. We were in a hurry and we didn't realize the impact of our actions. Impact, I repeated. An interesting choice of words. The impact fractured my mother's hip. The revelation sent a visible shock through the room. Henderson paled further. Your mother, he whispered. Yes, I replied calmly, though that shouldn't matter. What should matter is that she was a human being deserving of basic decency. I opened my portfolio and removed Claire's report. This assessment details a pattern of behavior consistent with what happened this morning. Subordinates discarded, contributions minimized, concerns dismissed, all from people deemed insignificant to your advancement. I slid the report toward Porter, then stood to leave. Mr. Reynolds, Collins called desperately, everyone makes mistakes. One incident shouldn't define a person's career. I paused at the door, turning back to face them. You're absolutely right, Mr. Collins. One incident doesn't define a career. I gestured to the report. Patterns do. As I walked out, Porter followed me into the hallway. The board will act on your recommendation, David. But I have to ask, what do you want to happen here? I thought of my mother in the hospital bed, of her lifetime teaching that justice isn't about punishment, but restoration. I don't want their careers destroyed, William, I said finally. I want them to understand the ripple effects of how they treat people. Perhaps start by having them volunteer in your company's community outreach program, the one serving elderly residents, for 6 months, not as a photo opportunity, but as actual service. Porter looked surprised. That's it? After what they did? Justice isn't about destroying people, William. It's about transforming them. I checked my watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to the hospital. As the elevator doors closed, my phone vibrated with a text from the board secretary. Emergency vote complete. Henderson and Collins removed from president consideration. New community service program approved with them as required participants. Full board sends apologies to your mother. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling no triumph, only quiet resolution. The confrontation wasn't about vengeance or even personal satisfaction. It was about alignment, helping a company practice the values it preached. As I drove back to the hospital, I thought about what I would tell my mother, not about corporate politics or boardroom tension, but about how two men might learn from their mistake. How sometimes the most powerful lesson isn't delivered through punishment, but through perspective. And perhaps most importantly, how her lessons about justice had shaped not just my career, but the kind of man I had become. The night had settled fully by the time I returned to my mother's hospital room. The hallways were quieter now, nurses moving with practiced efficiency, past rooms where healing and hurt coexisted. Mum was awake, her reading glasses perched on her nose, a dog-eared copy of Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath in her hands, the same copy she'd used to teach generations of students about dignity and hardship. "I thought you might be asleep," I said, slipping into the chair beside her bed. She marked her place carefully with the faded bookmark I'd made her in elementary school. "I wanted to wait for you. Your face tells me you've had quite an evening." I smiled, reaching for her hand. "The board made their decision. Henderson and Collins won't be getting their promotions." She studied me carefully. "And how do you feel about that?" It was the same question she'd asked throughout my life whenever I faced moral crossroads, never about what happened, but about how I carried it within me. I searched for the right word. Settled. Not vindicated? Not triumphant? She pressed gently. I shook my head. "They're not monsters, Mom. Just men who forgot that every interaction matters, even with people they think can't affect their lives." Her eyes softened. "That's what I've always loved about your work, David. You've never confused accountability with cruelty." I told her then about the community service program, how Henderson and Collins would spend 6 months working with elderly residents, not as punishment but as redirection. How sometimes the most powerful consequence isn't losing something, but gaining perspective. "They'll be helping people like me?" she asked, a slight smile playing at her lips. "People exactly like you," I confirmed. "Though I doubt any of them will have your talent for turning uncomfortable situations into life lessons." She laughed softly, then winced as the movement jostled her hip. "I've had 78 years of practice." A nurse came in to check her vitals, informing us that she'd be discharged tomorrow with outpatient physical therapy twice weekly for 6 weeks. When we were alone again, my mother's expression turned serious. "David, do you remember what you said when you decided to leave your executive position to become a consultant, when everyone thought you were crazy to walk away from that corner office?" I nodded. It had been 20 years ago, after watching a CEO I respected destroy a company culture in pursuit of short-term profits. I said I wanted to help build corporate environments where people were valued, not just managed. "You've done that," she said firmly. "One evaluation at a time." The night deepened around us as we sat in comfortable silence. I thought about the moments that define us, not the grand gestures or public triumphs, but the quiet decisions about who we choose to be when tested. "I have something to tell you," I said finally. "Porter called while I was driving back. Henderson asked for your contact information." Her eyebrows rose. "Oh? He wants to apologize personally. And—" I hesitated. "He asked if he could visit you. Said he'd understand if you refused." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers smoothing the hospital blanket. "What did you tell him?" "I said I'd ask you, that it was your decision, not mine." She nodded slowly. "Tell him yes, not for his sake, but because forgiveness isn't just something you grant others, it's something you give yourself." I smiled, recognizing another of her life lessons, ones she'd lived rather than just taught. "I will." As visiting hours ended and I prepared to leave, she caught my hand. "David, what you did today wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about restoration, making things right not just for me, but for everyone those men interact with." I leaned down to kiss her forehead. I had a good teacher. 3 weeks later, I sat in my home office reviewing a new set of corporate evaluations when Claire called to inform me that Henderson had requested a meeting. When he arrived, the arrogance I'd seen at the gas station was gone, replaced by something rarer in corporate America, genuine reflection. "Mr. Reynolds," he began, "I've been working at the community center for almost a month now." I nodded, but said nothing, giving him space to continue. "There's a woman there, Mrs. Abernathy, 82, former high school principal. She reminds me of your mother. Same dignity, same sharp mind." He paused, searching for words. Yesterday she showed me pictures of her students from 40 years ago. She remembered every name, what they'd overcome, where they ended up. Sounds like my mother, I said quietly. It made me realize something, Henderson continued. All those efficiency reports I've been so proud of, they never measured what actually matters. I've been counting the wrong things my entire career. I studied him carefully, looking for signs of performance rather than genuine change. I found none. What are you planning to do with this realization, Mr. Henderson? He straightened slightly. I'm creating a mentorship program for our senior staff, pairing executives with community elders for perspective training. The board has approved a pilot program. I was hoping, he hesitated, I was hoping you might consider consulting on its implementation. I smiled. I think I'd like that. And I know someone who would make an excellent advisor as well, once her physical therapy is complete. As Henderson left, I thought about what my mother had taught me throughout my life, that true power isn't found in how we treat those who can elevate us, but in how we treat those who seemingly can't. That character isn't built in grand moments, but revealed in small ones. That sometimes the most important leadership skill isn't speaking, but listening. 2 months later, I sat in the community center watching my mother, cane still in hand but strength returning, guiding a table discussion with 6 Thornwell executives, including Henderson and Collins. Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of experience, as she explained how dignity transcends age, position, and circumstance. I stayed in the background, observing as I always did, but with a different kind of satisfaction than I'd ever known in my career. This wasn't about evaluations or reports or even corporate ethics. It was about the ripples we create in every interaction, how a moment of callousness at a gas station could transform into months of reflection and perhaps a lifetime of change. If this story resonated with you, I'd be deeply grateful if you'd like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest actions, just like taking a moment to support content that matters to you.